Welcome to The Change, a podcast about the changes in life that shake, break, and make us. I'm Laura, a 45-year-old writer, podcaster, and mum who has until recently always loved change.
And I'm Cathy, a 53-year-old writer, podcaster, and mum, and change is actually my kryptonite. We acknowledge the traditional owners of country throughout Australia on which this podcast is recorded and recognise the continuing connections to lands, waters and communities.
We pay our respects to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander cultures and elders past and present.
Hello.
Hello. Oh, Cathy, how wrong we were. And if you hadn't guessed, we're talking about the US election results, as everybody is. The WhatsApp women chats are lighting up with sadness, anger, and all the big feelings, really. We were both so sad about what has happened and kind of just wanted to jump on and talk through it.
Yeah, because we kind of thought maybe some of you might be feeling some of the same feelings as we are. Some of you might actually be happy and excited, and we get that. And that's, that's living in democracy. We don't all have to agree. But I got to say that my overwhelming feeling was sadness and disbelief. Like I saw something on one of the many nightly talk shows in the US, and it was kind of meant to be a humorous comedy reel, going through like all the reasons why Harris lost. But she ended her monologue with, I kind of don't really care why she lost. I care why so many people voted for him.
Yeah.
And why he won.
That's right. And I think that's the thing, isn't it? It's like we can all have different political opinions, but at the end of the day, the majority of Americans, and it was a relatively small majority, but still a legitimate majority, chose Donald Trump, convicted felon, rapist, misogynist, racist, and openly all those things. Openly against a woman who is, highly educated, whatever you believe her, political views to be. She was for inclusivity, for, women's health. And yeah, that's exactly right. It's that trying to understand and also realize that maybe we just live in a bubble on the internet where we're all just, and this happens every single time, doesn't it? We kind of go, Brexit, it happened then. I was a complete disbelief that was going to happen. That was around the same time as the first Trump election.
And I missed the first Trump election because that's in the time that my brain forgot.
So that's not a bad thing to forget. That portion.
Like, I don't really remember these feelings. I don't remember.
Interesting, yeah.
This sadness and disappointment that I imagine a lot of people felt in 2016.
Yeah.
Because everyone thought that Hillary was a shoo-in, right? Yeah. Like everyone was just like, there is no way on God's green earth they are voting for Trump. And this was before some of the really bad stuff that we have since heard about him. This is before
and the court cases as well, right? Yeah.
This is before his niece has written a book about him. This is before the insurrection. This is before any of those things. I think the world just thought, that's just not going to happen, right? Like he was a rich man, a rich white guy who I think in some ways kind of just thought he'd do this for a bit of a laugh and then won. And it was like, okay, got to do this now. And so I didn't experience the sadness and disbelief that everybody else is feeling. Well, I don't remember those feelings. I quite possibly did experience them.
I'm sure that you did.
Time,
yeah.
But I don't remember feeling them. And so that's not a bad thing. This is where my memory, that period of time that I forgot protects me, right? But yeah, like the overwhelming sadness, and I just fundamentally it was like, how did we all get it so wrong? because, you know, on paper, more than competent, more than like overachiever, actually, like really, like overqualified for the job. But actually a large majority of the people said no.
So let's talk about the majority that did vote for him. So I've got the BBC News exit polls, and this has been shared quite widely in Australian media too, because it's a real great breakdown of who did vote for Trump and who voted for Harris. And obviously 54% of men voted for Trump against 44% of women. So we can blame the men for you know, that, which is not surprising, right?
We always thought that was going to be the case, right?
Yes,
she was
that's
always
right.
going to have to win over the men.
Yeah. I think when it comes to race, this is the most disappointing part for me as a white woman, that only 43% of white people voted for Kamala Harris versus 55% Trump. And in comparison, 86% of black US Americans voted for Harris and 12% voted for Trump. So you can see where we're going. It's the white men and women as well. And age-wise, this was quite interesting. So
because
it was.
I've seen the stat that Gen X, like us.
Gen X, we are the middle-aged and up to age 64. So I don't know if that's maybe
Gen
a little.
X. It's all
that's
Gen X.
Okay.
Yep.
So awfully depressing there, I would say. Gen X voted mostly for Trump, 53% versus 45%. And then education, this is the big one too, right? So the college graduate, so anyone with a college degree and over, 57% voted for Harris versus 41% Trump. And it was, you know, almost the exact reverse for anyone with no college degree.
Yep. And he openly said, I love the uneducated.
Yeah.
During the campaign. Like, he openly said that, right?
Yeah.
So that is scary and sad.
Yeah, that's right.
But there's also, I think there's an undercurrent in that we're kind of maybe not seeing, in that people, once upon a time, you didn't have to have a college degree, or even in Australia, you didn't have to have a university degree to get into senior leadership positions, to get far in your career, like a long way in your career. By far, I mean, you know, get ahead in your career. You could get in, you could do trades, you could do internships, you could do, you know, I know somebody that started in the newsroom at New Herald and ended up editing international magazines. So, and chose not to go to university, didn't have to, was able to do a cadetship. Like, there were many, many paths to success once upon a time. And so when we're looking at education versus no degree, you know, like degree versus no degree, there's a lot of people in that who feel that they will never be able to get a degree as well. Like, no path for them from where they are to be able to get that college degree. And something that I heard, and I think it is like the echo chambers, right? Because we talk about echo chambers a lot, and the algorithms feed us what we like, you know,
so
and
we see all the same liberal,
more
as in open-minded, left wing.
Big L. And we see more of the same, because that's the way the algorithm works. Every now and then it'll throw something in there that'll make you angry, because there's also a whole science behind. They know that
rage makes you click.
Rage clicks, right?
Yeah.
But the Gen X's that I was following, and the Gen X's that I follow from the US, Harris supporters, not Trump supporters.
No, so it's hard to see, isn't it, when you don't see those people?
Yeah.
And I think so obviously there's our feelings, right, about it. We are not in America. We're not political analysts, but as we said in the last episode, when we were still so hopeful. And yet the worrying thing, I think the most worrying thing, you know, whether or not I think I know much about Trump politics, is what it's done for very conservative, ultra right-wing misogynistic, racist men that now feel they can say the quiet part out loud about their feelings. So that was the case in 2016 too. This has not changed, but I think because he's been further emboldened, it's the comeback of all comebacks. You know, some of that, the press, especially Fox News and Sky News, are very delighted with this result.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've seen some of Andrew Tate's posts being shared around, and it's sort of like women saying how sad they are, and he's just like, make me a sandwich, you know, that kind of thing. Get back in the kitchen. There's all this thing.
Your body, my choice.
Your body, my choice. And it's so worrying. And we're old in the fact that we don't have to worry about unplanned pregnancies or, you know, that kind of healthcare. But I would be absolutely terrified as a young woman in the US right now. And I have heard lots of rumors about women and families that have got Australian citizenship or have kind of are coming back. They want to come home. They don't want to stay. I've seen posts about people, say, having a travel ban on the US and being like, I'm not going to the US while Donald Trump's there. Wondering if there's going to be, you know, people from LGBTQ groups, trans people that are like, I'm out. I mean, it's not easy for everyone just to leave, right? People have connections and family and livelihoods, and you can't just leave.
But pack up and leave, right?
You can't.
Like that implies a certain amount of privilege.
It does. That's right.
A lot of those voters who voted for Harris, there's a significant demographic of those voters that don't have that privilege to be able to just pack up and leave because they don't have transferable skills to another country. They might not be on the skills migration list. I mean, Australia itself we've just announced we are limiting migration, right? So there is a significant amount of privilege in being able to just pack up and leave when you don't like the outcome of a result. Also, where do you go? Like,
that's
where
right.
do
Unless
you
do have family overseas, it's different, right? So, yeah, it's different for people that have got Australian family or British family or from, you know, other countries in the world where they can. But yeah, for the average person, that's definitely not an option. And I thought that Kamala Harris's kind of her speech that she gave after the result was officially announced, and it was very positive. And you know, we stay, we fight, we look for the light. And I think it was a beautiful message. And I suppose that's what we just have to, you know,
hold the hope, I guess.
Yeah, hold the hope, hold the fort, stay strong. And the humanity, when you look back through eras and decades in the past, you certainly see history 2 steps forward, 1 step back, 1 step forward, 2 steps back. I think about, you know, the Victorian era being super conservative, whereas the period before that wasn't. And then you had the World War and then
the world kind of expanded and I mean, we are not political pundits, so we will not try and pull apart why, the whys or the wherefores. Though I guess my personal view on that is it probably boils down to something as simple as, and I'm pretty sure it was the Clinton campaign when Bill Clinton won from George Bush. I'm pretty sure they ran on a line, "It's the economy, stupid." And I'm pretty sure that really, when it comes down to it, you and I and many of the people that I follow from the US are sitting in a position of privilege in being able to think about, well, those matters, those things, those bigger things matter. Those bigger, I can vote for the bigger thing.
Yeah, the moral reasoning.
The moral reasoning. I can vote for those bigger things because I have a certain amount of privilege. I have privilege because I have an education, or I have privilege because I have a good job, or I have privilege because of the color of my skin, and I think we sometimes forget our privilege. And when you are just desperately trying to put food on the table, a roof over your head, keep a job, and put petrol in your car to get to the said job, and someone is standing up in front of you saying, I'm going to make sure that the jobs stay here for the people who were born here. I'm not going to let them go to migration. I'm going to keep the jobs here. I'm going to make your life cheaper. more affordable, and I'm going to find a way for you to have a job. Now, we can pull apart all of that, but we're not those people, right? Like, we are not political pundits. That's not us to pull apart his policies or concepts of plans or whatever. But at its
the
core,
heart of it,
that's what he told people. He told people he was going to make their life better, and he was going to find them a job because he was going to keep the jobs in America.
Yeah.
And so when you are worried about where is my next meal coming from, how am I going to fill my car to get to my job, you don't think past those issues because you don't have the luxury to think past those issues. And maybe that's oversimplifying it too, and maybe it is as simple as my husband says, which is that America was not ready for a female president. And
look, I think there's maybe that
stuff as well.
I think so. I think there is. I think what you just said, though, is so true. And I read this great article by Lee Sales, who is certainly a smarter woman than me and has written really for the ABC. She's a fantastic ABC journalist, for those that are not aware of Lee Sales' work. But she wrote a piece about why the Democrats lost. And one of the things she talked about was just what you said, really, was that the Democrats, their campaign had a lot of misjudgments, and they had a tin ear when it came to the gap between rich and poor and how politically potent that was. And she talked about, while Donald Trump was out there, saying ridiculous things, he was flipping burgers at Macca's. And then you had, Harris on stage with Beyonce, and she wrote, and I thought this was quite good. She said, much was made of the value of the Beyonce endorsement at a rally last month. The music megastar's gleaming, lustrous hair screamed, "I spent more on this color, cut and blow dry than you earn in a month." And I guess, that's kind of the thing. And she was sort of saying this was not the time for a rerun of the 2008 Yes We Can campaign, because obviously Michelle and Barack Obama were very involved in this with Harris and were very supportive. You had Oprah, you had some really big hitters in the celebrity world backing her, and people, like you said, they're just not, they're really just worried about getting petrol in their car. They're not worried about whether or not Beyonce is a supportive person in the campaign, perhaps. And I felt when I read Lee Sales' article, and I'll put a link in the show notes to it, that it sort of made me feel better in a way that not everyone that voted for Trump are horrifically misogynistic or racist. They just have a different motivation than we do. And and often we are clouded by our own privileges and not understanding where everybody's coming from. And I think that's the best way to grapple with it, isn't it?
And I think we need to sometimes remember that we have privilege. And it's very easy
always,
when you think, well, for me, I think, I'm an older woman, so I've been overlooked for a job, or I get overlooked in a shop, or, I have an invisible disability. I have live with mental health issues. I'm female, so there's many reasons that I can feel like I am overlooked and that I don't have privilege. But actually, when it comes down to it, I do. I have a voice, and I have a job, and I have love and support, and I'm not worried about the simple basic necessities in life. So the fact that I'm not worried about the simple basic necessities in life means I can think about the bigger picture. I can think about, and that's not to say, and I also don't want to dismiss that people who are worried about the basic necessities in life also don't worry about the big picture. Of course they do. But sometimes you vote because you want a better situation. And then when you're in a better situation, you think about what's next. So I don't know. I mean, I don't know. It's very much an echo chamber, and that I've been seeing, and a lot of sadness that I've been seeing, and everyone's still trying to grapple with that. But I also was, when I woke up yesterday morning, terribly sad and devastated, which feels strange because it's a country a long way away, you know? Like, I've got to put it into perspective. This is not Australia. We did not do this. It is not our government. But what I was particularly sad about, I think, was that I know we're going to have a federal election next year.
Mm-hmm.
We had a state election in Queensland a few weeks ago, and some pretty horrific things were said by some very minor parties in Queensland. So I was scared a little bit that could translate to Australia. I don't know.
Yeah, totally. And I know what you're going to say, and I think it's a great way to probably bring this episode to a close on a positive note. Before we get there, I was just going to comment on them. Yes, scared about the things that have been said here in Australia, and also because of the level of misinformation and kind of the horror of social media, and like we've touched on the algorithms, and that's, I think, we can say that, yeah, hopefully a lot of the people that voted for Trump were voting on economic reasons. But there was also just a lot of people, that didn't turn out. There was a high percentage of people that didn't vote in the first, for many reasons. Also, that getting their information from Facebook, X, Elon Musk, is hugely powerful and very troubling and very, supportive of incels and terrible men on the internet. And one thing I noted was a search term in the US that's increased hugely since Trump won the election is 4B. What is the 4B movement?
What is that?
Yeah, and what it is people in the US are calling for the use of South Korea's 4B movement in the United States. And this is basically women in South Korea have started using this term to swear off men. So it's called the 4B movement because in Korean the four tenets each begin with bi or B, which means no, according to a paper published by two South Korean researchers. And I'll put a link to this article that explains what it's all about. So it's basically, it began getting attention in 2017. It was a bit like the kind of Me Too style reckoning where women are just like, nah, they're not going to have relationships with men. They're not going to give them any of their time, basically. And the nation's been battling this declining birth rate for several years, and some are crediting the 4B movement for that because women are just sick of awful men who don't care about them or their bodies, their bodily autonomy. And I think this is how women are fighting back. And I notice even here in Australia, Abby Abby Chatfield, just had a moment of not remembering her name. She's a very vocal ex-reality TV star and now podcaster and radio host and famous in her own right, talking about how, and she just said men are being disgusting to her since the result of the vote, and that she is telling other women, just do not let these men into your life, like cut them off, do not let them touch you, do not let them impregnate you, worst case scenario. Do not let them anywhere near you or your body. And I think that is women's way, really, the only way of having bodily autonomy when the men are trying to control pregnancies and what we do with our bodies. So I thought that was really interesting, whether or not, the birth rate starts heavily declining in the US as well because of this kind of, this move to try and control women's bodies. We'll have to wait and see. But it's interesting how the young women are going to move forward and deal with it.
And I think, in just wrapping up the privilege thing before we kind of wrap up altogether, I think sometimes when we're talking about privilege can be wrapped up with people think that if I give away a little bit of my privilege to somebody else to lift somebody else up, then I'm going to be worse off. But actually the research and the studies show that is not actually the case. When we lift others up, then everyone benefits from that. There's a lot of research that is shown about, even as simple as women in the workforce, the more women there are in the workforce, the better that is for everybody. It's not that there's less jobs to go around. It's actually more beneficial for everybody.
Including the men.
That's right.
Yeah.
And so somehow we have to frame this conversation so that the younger generation are not afraid of strong women. And there is the Andrew Tates and those people are very much playing into that insecurity mindset of, if she's strong and powerful, you are weak. So somehow we need to flip that narrative. And it's not about women being not strong or not powerful or not confident, but it is uplifting our young men so that they're not feeling threatened by that. So that doesn't feel like it's a threat to them. So they're big, really big societal conversations that I think we need to sort of, they're going to come out. They're going to, you know, and I mean, my son is older. He is engaged. He is very respectful. He was raised in a household where he understands that women are equal, you know. So I'm very lucky. He's surrounded by good men. You know, there are a lot of good men
that's very
in our
important.
lives, and whether that's younger men, you know, my nephews who are older, some of my nephews who are younger, his uncles, his grandparents, you know, lots of good men in his life. And I think that's all we can do is surround our younger people with good people so that they don't
we
feel
all
threatened.
play a part. That's
We
right.
all do. So
men, women, and you know, whether you're a mum of boys or mum of girls, everyone's got boys in their lives, everyone's got girls in their lives, and we need to really drive home that message of respect and
also as a mum to young girls, young women, to remind them that they don't get to put guys down. You know, they have to treat guys respectfully as well. You know, it's not about, you know, you don't get to put them down just because you want to feel better about yourself. It's not about that. It's we're all in this together. I just wanted to round this out because, as I said, we do have a federal election, and so I was pretty kind of disheartened and a bit concerned and a bit worried that this might flow over into Australia. And look, anyone who knows me knows that I'm a little bit more left-leaning than I am right-leaning. But I mean, I would think that I was probably a swing voter, but, you know, definitely more on the left of the centre.
Okay.
And anyway, I reached out to a lovely millennial woman that I talked to, and she is a Liberal insider. And I know
and
that
Liberal is the Conservative Party here in Australia for anyone
Conservative Party in
listening
Australia.
overseas.
And she was hoping for a Harris win. And so I reached out to her because I was just like, can you give me some hope? Can you give me some hope that we won't see this translate into Australia? And she said that on a federal level, there are definitely some conservatives within the party who would like to see some kind of reform, but they're in the minority and there's not the numbers in the party room to get that across the line.
And we're talking about sort of women's healthcare issues?
Yeah, women's health.
Women's health.
Yeah, that really conservative abortion reform. And there are many within the party who would potentially even quit if that was something that the party would push. And while there might be people inside of the party who are personally conservative in their own views, they also won't enforce them on others. And they're all aware that around 80% of Australians are very supportive of women's health rights. And it could be potential political suicide to pursue it. And also the hope she gave me was because of our preferential and compulsory voting that we have in Australia, we have always rewarded parties that stay in the centre. In the US, only half of the population came out to vote, which actually means that it was a lot of the fringes. So we might see some of the rhetoric said, and we might see that translate because we always see awful things happen. But, yeah, the hope that she left me with was that we shouldn't see this translate to Australia. That's not to say that we won't see a change of government or anything like that. But yeah, I don't
that's good and hopeful, and it is good to see. And Australia's got a very different system where same in the UK too, where politics are not as closely tied to religion. And I think the US really is a very different beast, isn't it?
Absolutely.
And their Supreme Court is very weighted in the Republican Party, and that's been due to Donald Trump putting his people in there. And it's a sad and difficult time in the US.
But I think we need to really remember, and if we look at Harris's words and, think about what she said at the very end of her speech, which was that it is in the darkness that we see the light. And that's a famous quote from someone in history. I'm not exactly sure who, but and she said that if we are entering a dark time, and if we are around the world entering a period of darkness, because that happens, it's cyclical.
That's right. Yeah.
And, some of the economic issues that people are facing in the US, many people in Australia are facing those exact same economic issues. And they just want to be able to put petrol in their car. They want to have job security. They want cheaper rents. They want those things. And so globally, if we are entering a period of darkness, then we need to look for the light, and we need to shine the light on the good.
Yeah. And listen to people that are sensible political insiders like your contact, and think, well, Australia is different. It might be difficult times in the US right now. We are a different nation. And hopefully, this won't happen here. But also, as you say, it is always darkest just before the dawn as well. Is that some other quote? And
wasn't that a Winston Churchill quote? I don't know.
Quite possibly. But
he said a lot of inspirational things, or his speechwriter wrote those things.
That you can find on Pinterest, which is where I find most of my inspirational quotes.
or you can, if you're a little bit like me and just likes a little bit of the tragedy, you could follow this very funny.
Yes, I know what you're going to say.
It's called Disappointing Affirmations, and
love it so much.
It is so funny and sometimes a little bit pointed, I will say, but sometimes it's just like, yep, you need to have a bit of a laugh.
You do, and if nothing else, that's what we need right now. Yeah. All right. Catch you, Cathy.
Hug.
Yeah, collective group hug.
Thanks for listening to The Change, a fully independent podcast. Whether you're seeking inspiration, curious about change, or just here for the great banter, we'd love you to make The Change your new go-to podcast.
And even better, send us your voice notes or questions about change. We'll use them on the show. Email us at changepod2023@gmail.com or DM us on Instagram at _change_pod. Find us wherever you get your podcasts. And don't forget to follow us on Instagram for more on The Change.